These days, Final Fantasy is a super diverse series. You want a cyberpunk dystopia? Done. You want a game that combines Harry Potter with guns and sappy lounge music? Weird, but you do you. What's that? You want an isekai? Oh, I'm sorry, you said you want a reverse isekai. I got you. Want a third-person shooter? It sucks ass, but Square made sure it existed, goddammit. I also got MMOs in flavors of online, offline, and a swirl of both. If you are not inherently hostile to the idea of Final Fantasy, then there is no doubt that there's at least one game in the series that will really get your airship engine going, if you know what I'm saying. But what even is Final Fantasy anyways? Nowadays it has the freedom to be a Garugamesh road trip simulator, but the first third of the series isn't quite as lucky. Originally, Final Fantasy as a concept could be chalked up to a few key features. Turn-based combat, Nobuo Uematsu's beautiful music, Tolkien-inspired high fantasy, and Yoshitaka Amano's stunning ethereal art, all of which were routinely tied together under the direction of Hironobu Sakaguchi to create what would eventually become a very consistent series. FF1 through 5 have a lot of differences between them, ranging from subtle to literally punching yourself in the face, but I don't think it's too controversial to say that these games were much more cohesive with each other than the games that would follow them. They all share this general vibe and presentation that's tailor-made to carry you along an epic journey to save the entire world from a clear manifestation of unambiguous evil. Calling it formulaic almost feels like missing the point. It is the formula. Traditional may be the kinder word for them. While it was made in a relatively new medium, the focus on classic fantasy elements paired with stories filled with righteous quests ordained by a powerful king for the sake of taking down a practitioner of dark magic is the kind of story we've been telling each other since we've been able to start telling stories. And Final Fantasy V does very little to break that mold. Rather, what it does to stand out is learn from all of the games that came before it, taking the best of what made each of them work, and then wraps them up in a package so dripping with wholesome charm that you can't help but be swept up by it, if you accept it for what it is. Playing it now, FF5 can seem a little quaint. It's this really colorful, cutesy SNES JRPG that is just heartbreakingly earnest about the kind of adventure it wants to take you on. You need to save a set of 4 elemental crystals from an evil wizard with your ragtag group made up of a himbo, a princess, a genderqueer pirate, and the world's last good boomer. All of whom, and I cannot stress this enough, sincerely care about and respect each other. There is not even an ounce of serious tension, angst, or inner conflict to be had between the 5 playable characters we meet over our journey. Rather, there is precisely one source of serious conflict in this game, and he is a void wizard, unironically named X-Step. He is evil. Why is he evil? He wants power. Why does he want power? Because he's evil. Also because he's a tree or something. Look, it's weird and arbitrary, don't worry about it. He is evil because being evil makes you strong, and being strong is cool. This is not a complicated story, and if you're expecting this to be something even approaching ankle deep, you're going to be sorely disappointed. However, in the year of our Lord 2020, there's something deeply refreshing about the kind of wholesome experience FF5 has to offer. Part of that is a fantastic sense of progression and experimentation granted by the stellar job system that, honest to God, still holds up amazingly. From beginning to end, there is not only a wide variety of new actions and abilities you will frequently acquire, but it's the kind of stuff that's actually exciting to chase after. There's the obvious and boring stuff like HP plus 10%, which is inherently useful in any circumstance. Or you can make yourself a zombie. Want to practice medicine by randomly mixing whatever you find on the ground and drinking it? Good news! You're God now. Suggestion: just steal shit. Whatever. No judgment. There are even abilities like Light Step and find passages that are helpful outside of combat, which is why this is the only Final Fantasy game where you can walk on lava. And of course, there's...
You're not worthy as my opponent.
This is also the first Final Fantasy game to feature Blue Mage, by the way, which, yeah, makes sense. There's a lot of wacky abilities in this game, but no wacky Final Fantasy experience would be complete without the ability to self-destruct, a proud tradition that continues to this day. What is this series? So, how does this actually work in practice? Put simply, the game grants you the ability to choose between basically equipping either 2 separate jobs at once, or a super powerful specialty ability that can turn your primary job into an unstoppable death machine. And this goes a long way to lending a shockingly large amount of depth and strategy to almost every single encounter. As a result of those skills, you are heavily incentivized not to keep your team static. Because, you can, in theory, go through the whole game with just knights and white mages. But aren't you curious about what abilities Dragoon has? I mean, might be something that makes your knight way stronger. And once you level it up, the ability is yours forever. So you change Lena to Dragoon. But now you have no tank, so you switch Butz to Samurai. And oh yeah, you max out Summoner on Ferris, don't want to waste any AP when you could be leveling up Cannoneer. And just like that, your entire team and the mechanics they revolve around have become completely different. This is a common experience in this game, and it goes a long way to motivating you to vary your own gameplay. And consequently, it never really feels stale over the 30 or so hours you'll be spending with it, because there's always something new to be working towards or trying out. It is sincerely one of the smartest leveling systems ever created. There's a real sense of momentum as you see your characters steadily become more and more powerful, not just in the numbers they deal or even the abilities they have access to, but the way you can combine and exploit them to create teams that are as powerful as they are unique to your own personal taste. Which is exactly why 4 ninjas with the ability to flirt is objectively and undeniably the best team. Wanna dual-wield katanas? Don't lie to me, you wouldn't be here if you weren't a weeb. We both know this rules. Final Fantasy and Self-Expression don't hang out that often. But this is one of those rare times where it truly feels like you can and will play through it in a way that is largely unique to you. There are definitely optimal setups to choose from, to be sure, but if your team can't catapult a skunk at a dragon, then what's even the point? And yeah, some of the jobs you can level up are undeniably better than others. Isn't that right, Geomancer, you cozy-looking useless dork? But since mastering even the worst jobs is rewarded with a permanent stat boost to the actual objectively best job, Freelancer, there suddenly becomes no such thing as a wasted experience point. It can even incentivize you to try to max out jobs you'd otherwise ignore, cause while Berserker does suck to actually use and have no useful abilities, it grants how much stamina? The sense of achievement and freedom the job system provides is without question one of, debatably even the, major element that manages to make this game feel like the massive and empowering heroic journey it is, while still generally feeling as crisp and new today as it did on release. But focusing too much on how the mechanics work so well still isn't the same as answering why the game as a whole still feels so fresh despite its simplicity. To answer that particular question, we need to talk about everyone's favorite postmodernist literary device, deconstruction.
If you just wanted to bore your audience like that, you didn't have to waste so much time getting to it.
Yeah, I know. Just please hang in there with me for a second, okay? Thing is, whether you like it or not, deconstructed fantasy has slowly but surely emerged as the definitive cultural movement of this now past decade. Someone, somewhere, wished on a monkey's paw for geek shit to become mainstream, and now we have a million movies and TV shows employing fantasy elements while doing their best to break them down away from their Tolkien roots. Game of Thrones is a joke now, but there's no denying that its subversive take on its genre has most likely shifted expectations for what fantasy is supposed to be for an entire generation of mainstream audiences. And the same can be said of zombie stories, comic book stories, sci-fi stories, and basically just about anything that previously would have been slapped with the nebulous label of genre fiction across all mediums. Up to and including, of course, video games. The most famous of these would probably be The Last of Us and Undertale, but that really is just scratching the surface. Spec Ops, Call of Duty, Braid, Dragon Age, Frog Fractions, Grand Theft Auto, Darkest Dungeon, Getting Over It, Cart Life, The Stanley Parable, Dark Souls, Doki Doki Literature Club, Dive Kick, Yoko Taro's entire career, we will be here all day. Hell, even Final Fantasy managed to throw its hat in the postmodern ring again before the decade closed out with Shadowbringers. Pokemon did this. Goddamn Pokemon! That is how pervasive this trope has been. Even Pokemon! And let's be clear, a lot of those things are absolutely amazing. I just named off some of my favorite games ever. Not all of them, of course, but, you know, who doesn't want to kiss Yoko Taro? Mwah. This can and often does lead to great or even masterful stories, and in a lot of ways, Final Fantasy was ahead of the curve on this. While Final Fantasy still constantly engages in the more traditional high fantasy aspects that used to define the series, these days it's always with some level of deconstruction, some level of winking and nodding at the audience to say, ah, this may look like your grandpa's Final Fantasy, but you'll find there's more going on here than just saving some princess. FF6, 7, 9, 10, and 14 all play very thoroughly with the idea of what you expect it to be, in some really impactful ways that range from cute stuff like 99% of the fan service in FF14 to more meaningful uses like, oh wow, this tiny black mage is now talking to me about what the meaning of death is. I just got home from the 4th grade and I was not prepared for this. Like I said, it can and does result in some amazing stuff. So, what's the issue? What is it that still makes FF5 feel so fresh? At least to me. Well, I'll put it this way. Ice cream is great, right? It all starts out with your base vanilla flavor, but then you can add all kinds of different stuff to it to make it stand out. And Lord knows people have done that big time, which is awesome because, hey, who doesn't love cookie dough and ice cream? Yeah, and maybe you can add some nuts to it, maybe some fudge, hell, get some caramel in there while you're at it. Just add whatever the hell you want, really. And just get it perfectly suited to your specific taste. But as you begin to pour those toppings in, you also start to lose the original flavor of the ice cream itself. And next thing you know, it's so far removed from what you started out with that saying they're the same slowly becomes a lie. And that's the best case scenario. Worst case, if you're not careful, is you start to run the risk of it becoming just an incoherent mess, devoid of any defining characteristic. However, one way or another, the original thing gets kind of erased in a way. And sure, you may have a new favorite thing ever, and may even enjoy the more complicated and nuanced flavors it has to offer. But then one day, your friend makes you some high-quality, lovingly crafted, homemade vanilla bean ice cream, and then you bite into it, and suddenly remember, oh, right, this was fantastic before we added any of this other bullshit to it. This is why we even eat ice cream in the first place. This is amazing! Final Fantasy V is that vanilla ice cream. I am making myself hungry. These days it feels like nearly every piece of fantasy media comes hot glued with some kind of apology for its own existence. Oh sure, we're fantasy, but not like that dorky fantasy or whatever. Look, these characters are doing the sex and enact genocide, and check out how badass this dude is. Are you not rock hard yet? Again, this is not to say these things can't be amazing, but when your writing is centered with an eye towards being a response to something first, and a sincere artistic expression second, it becomes easy to lose that sense of artistic sincerity altogether. Meanwhile, FF5 may not have as much thematic meat on the bone as the later works that built off its skeleton, but pure sincerity can count for a lot when it's truly authentic. Isn't that right, Paddington?
If you say so, sir.
Deconstructions are great, but they only work because we have something worth responding to begin with. There's a reason we've been telling this kind of story for so long and through so many cultures, but it runs deeper than just the traditional Campbellian monomyth. There's something intrinsically comforting about the kind of uncomplicated joy of a truly epic journey to do some unambiguous good with a set of true heroes who struggle and sacrifice, but ultimately overcome. It may be the cleanest expression of the experience of being alive that we have. After all, if we take it for granted that all art is reflective of its culture, what does it say when nearly every culture comes up with the same artistic formula? Probably that it's near universal, right? It's a shared experience for people who do not have any other shared experiences. Is FF5 actually the best Final Fantasy? No. Are you kidding me? Have you played 7 or 9? It's not even fair how much more successfully ambitious those games are. But this may very well be the best version of the experience it seeks to provide. And that experience has and continues to serve as the bedrock for an entire genre. Let us be entirely clear. Without games like this, we cannot get games like this. Wait, shit, wrong game. This. And that may not inherently make this game the best thing ever, but it does mean that it's seriously worth revisiting from time to time, if only to remind us what brought us here in the first place. There's a real purity to this kind of experience. You should play this game for the same reason you should, every once in a while, get yourself that exceptional high-quality vanilla ice cream. Sure, it may not be as sexy as salted caramel or Rocky Road or whatever, but sometimes just experiencing the best possible version of a simple joy's most basic form can help you appreciate the more complicated and nuanced things that derive from it. Playing Final Fantasy V isn't just great as an experience in and unto itself. It also does a lot to highlight just how creative and bold the games that followed it really were. And while it may be a story we've heard a million times before, it's one we keep telling for the same reason we keep singing 4-chord songs and painting landscapes. Because it's reassuring. It's inherently comforting to us in an almost essential way. So if you haven't experienced the uncomplicated, wholesome joy of a lovable band of knights and royalty saving the world from an evil wizard, then you've missed out on one of the most timeless and pure experiences a piece of media can offer. It's one that's absolutely worth having. And this is one of the best ways to have it. Anyways, fair says NB. Roll credits.